This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Over the last few years, you've probably heard about families getting separated at the U.S. southern border. It's a policy that was first put in place around 6 years ago. Back in March of 2017, the Trump administration began floating the idea of family separation as an immigration deterrent. After some piloting in areas like El Paso, Texas, the policy eventually took hold across the country a little over a year later in May of 2018. This zero-tolerance approach meant all migrants apprehended entering the country illegally were arrested and prosecuted. Any accompanying children under the age of 18 were handed over to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Once the kids were in HHS custody, they were either sent to Office of Refugee Resettlement Shelters or any known family members in the U.S., which often ended up being many miles away from where their parents were being held. After much public backlash and a lawsuit from the American Civil Liberties Union, the policy was reversed in June of 2018 by court order. The government had then estimated that more than 2,600 kids had been separated from their parents under this policy. Hundreds of these children, including infants and toddlers, were under the age of 5. Watchdog reports found that despite the court orders to end the policy in June, it continued throughout 2018. An October report from Amnesty International indicated that more than 6,000 family units, meaning whole families or individual members of families, had been separated between April 19th and August 15th of 2018, a much higher number than previously known. In total, they concluded over 8,000 family units have been separated since 2017. When asked about the policy, then President Donald Trump said his administration wasn't to blame for it.
No, I hate it. I hate the children being taken away. The Democrats have to change their law. That's their law.
It's worth noting administrations prior to Trump's did not typically separate children from their parents during the immigration process. Undocumented families were detained together and often kept together on parole to await their immigration cases. After courts ordered the government to reunite families, it still took months, if not years, to reunite many of them. Immigration advocates blame poor record-keeping procedures and general disarray inside border law enforcement agencies for the chaos.
Better coordination is always helps.
Mike Howell was a Homeland Security official in the Trump administration when the border policy was implemented. He agrees that there could have been better planning on the agency side of things, but also placed some blame on the parents who crossed the border illegally with their kids.
There's only one category of people that chose family separation in this country. It's the parents of those illegal aliens.
Many migrant parents have said the conditions that they left behind were simply too dangerous to return to. We are still learning the full scope of the emotional, psychological, and physical toll these separations had on these kids and parents. Facilities holding minors were small, dirty, and overcrowded. There have also been cases of abuse, starvation, and neglect reported. It's an incredibly difficult and painful chapter of America's broken immigration system, one that's being explored by a new Netflix documentary, Split at the Root.
Quiero contar mi historia porque yo sé que hay muchas personas que han pasado o están pasando lo mismo que yo.
We begin today's show with the growing outrage over the Trump administration's policy of separating immigrant families who cross the U.S.-Mexico border.
If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally.
A lot of people don't realize that it's actually a misdemeanor to cross into the country at a non-border checkpoint. So for the equivalent of basically a parking ticket, we're separating families and causing lifelong trauma.
Thousands of people waiting in line to go to jail.
Y yo le digo, pero abogado, ¿cómo voy a pagar tus honorarios? Me dice, no te preocupes, unas mujeres de Nueva York han pagado mis honorarios.
The documentary follows a group of female volunteers who worked tirelessly to reunite dozens of families separated by the Trump administration's policy. National correspondent Ben Chamiso recently interviewed the minds behind this project. Here's what he learned.
If this wasn't the time to act, if this wasn't the time to put our lives on the back burner, then when is it?
Mothers helping mothers. In the new Netflix documentary Split at the Root, a group of women come together to do what the US government couldn't or wouldn't do: reunite migrant families separated by the Trump administration. The inspiring story starts with one New York City woman who hears on NPR that a migrant detained in Arizona can't afford her bond and therefore cannot reunite with her kids in New York.
What was really intended to be a project to release one mom and get her back with her kids caught momentum so quickly and hasn't stopped since.
That woman is Julie Sweetheart Collazo, the co-founder of Immigrant Families Together, a grassroots organization that has reunited more than 130 families. I recently got the chance to interview her alongside the director of the documentary, Linda Goldstein-Knowlton. How do you both feel about the documentary coming out today, years after the zero tolerance policy was first enacted?
When we started the film, we very much wanted to get the film out as soon as possible to really connect with the zero tolerance policy. And it didn't happen because of COVID and any number of reasons, also because our collaborators, our protagonists, their stories were continuing in a way that really, it was an important part of continuing to tell the story.
I think that one of the things that this film does so beautifully is that it really underscores this was not just a Trump administration policy or problem. It preceded Trump, it continued through Trump and sort of found its worst expression, but it continues today.
And is there anything more specific that perhaps you want to touch on when it comes to the needs of the families that were separated?
The Biden administration has really largely, completely rejected any financial restitution for these families, but it is looking at legal pathways, not only for the parents who were separated from their children, but also immediate family members who were already in this country. And this is really, I think, a huge issue that is actually changing lives of several of the families that we support.
In 2021, the Biden administration walked out of restitution talks with separated families, saying that the parties were unable to reach a settlement. Sweetheart Collazo says giving these families temporary legal status is a huge first step, but it's not enough.
When you're not able to have a permanent, clear legal status, it makes it really difficult for you to make both short and long-term decisions about how you want to be in your community.
What do you hope people will take away from watching your documentary?
What I want people to take away is a reminder of their own humanity, as that every single person can make a difference. I mean, when Rosie starts, you know, when I first interviewed her and she's saying, I want to tell my story so that it can help other people. I mean, that's kind of the thesis for all of my films.
Ben Chamisso, Scripps News.
All right, many thanks for covering that story, Benny. The National Immigrant Justice Center reports that as of 2022, the Biden administration was still routinely separating some families through detention and deportation practices, despite also working to reunite those previously separated by the Trump administration. It has also moved to dismiss claims brought by separated families seeking compensation for the harm the policy has caused. As of this year, the Biden administration has succeeded in reuniting some 600 children with their parents, but about 1,000 children still remain separated from their families.